Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Retail Bulletin's latest event, the future of retail customer engagement. Thursday, 17th of June, and what a change we've had in the weather overnight. Wow, did someone turn the water on or what last night? So I hope you've all been enjoying this period of sun that we've had. It does seem like it may have left us for a few days at least, just in time for my birthday tomorrow, shameless plug. But a wet day means that you can spend a cozy day with us at the Retail Bulletin and watch lots of webinars. This is the first of 5 today. So we hope you do join us for all of them if you can, or at least some of them. But we're going to kick off this morning with our Fireside opening chat, winning in the new consumer landscape. I'm Darren. I'll be the moderator for all of today's sessions. I do a few of these events for the Retail Bulletin. Thank you for having me back. And I am the chairman of a men's skincare brand called Scrubbed and Williams Harding Consulting as well. So yeah, a bit of stuff going on, and lucky to be busy and very gratefully so as well. I've got an awesome lineup of people working with me this morning, and they'll be doing most of the talking, you'll be pleased to know. And I'm going to ask them if they can introduce themselves right now. Joe, good morning to you. Good to see you. How are you doing?
I'm doing really well, and lovely to be back, and great to see you, Darren, and great to see my fellow panelists too. Really looking forward to this session.
So who are you, Joe? Tell the audience that may not know who you are and whether they've seen you speak before.
Okay, so I have the privilege of being the CEO of the Institute of Customer Service. For those of you that don't know what the Institute does, my mum frequently asks me what I do for a living. We are here to help organisations pan sector, so across all industry sectors, to get better at customer experience. And I'm famously known for, not because this is just a good thing to do, but because there are very clear benefits to organisations if they focus in the longer term on the customer experience, be that financial return, brand loyalty, better reputation, higher levels of trust. And we work with our members. It's really to be the critical friend and to make them get better.
Well, it's awesome to have you with us today, and I'm looking forward to kicking off the chat with you in just a few moments. Alice, in your leafy background, tell us about you.
Hi, Darren. Yeah, so I'm Alice. I am the Group Client Director at Nectar 360. So I'm responsible for kind of how we monetize some of our digital assets within the e-commerce space, and also offsite activity for the Sainsburys Group brands. Something that I always say to anyone that says, oh, well, you know, you're just monetizing stuff, that's not really about customer experience, is it? Well, particularly in the online world, it's, if we annoy you, if we put the wrong ad at the wrong point, you're going to go off to Tesco or you're going to go off to Asda. So it's super, super important for me. And I'm really excited to kind of talk about a bit of the changing landscape that we're seeing within the sectors we work in.
Great to have you with us. Do you know I've got a bit of Argos history?
Oh, no, I didn't.
Yeah, I was in charge of London from 07 to 09 before I went to Hotel Chocolat, and I loved it, absolutely loved it. It was a brilliant time in my career. I really had a lot of fun at Argos. I've got a lot of heart for that brand. So look after it.
I will, I promise.
Good. Great to have you with us. Ben, tell us about you.
Hi, good morning, Darren. Yeah, my name is Ben Stirling. I'm the MD of Webloyalty, which is a Tenerity company. We primarily focus on increasing the value of customer interaction. So that really covers everything from monetization, so increasing the value, as I say, from a monetary perspective, but also going right the way to the other spectrum across engagement, rewards, and offers to drive repeat purchase and increase average order values. So yeah, thank you for having me, and great to be on such a great panel.
You are very welcome, and thank you as well. You get to sit and have a coffee for a while now, Ben, as I kick off with the initial panel, and I'll be with you very shortly. Audience, do please get involved. We love to hear questions from you as well. So depending on what device you're using, you will see somewhere top or bottom a Q&A button. Please do use it. You can ask a question generally of the panel, or you can ask one of our panelists a specific question. I promise, as the moderator, you will get all of your questions answered before we end the session today. So yeah, we'd love you to be involved. But let's kick things off. Joe, you and I have done a few of these events over the years, and we've done a lot of chatting about customer experience over the years as well. In this kind of, I want to say post-COVID world, but emerging post-COVID world might be a better way to say it. What does a good customer experience, or what is a good customer experience going to look like?
Well, Darren, huge question. And you're right, we have had many conversations about this. So I think if we just started with what we're kind of seeing, and you're right, that I think the most challenging situation is we're not really the other side of the pandemic. And I don't like the phrase new normal. I think it's a bit of an odd phrase, but I think we're in the next transition in terms of we've gone out of probably crisis, and now as organizations we're trying to manage through this next phase. But I don't think we are totally certain as to where this will land in, say, 12 months, 18 months time. So one of the big things I think that probably has come from this is the need to be pretty agile and pretty resilient in terms of us as organizations. And if I look at, just go back and to come forward, if I look at what's happened in the customer landscape specifically in the last 12 months, from the data and the research from the Institute, I think what we've seen is initially consumers and customers were pretty tolerant and felt very pleased that organizations were still trying their very hardest throughout the crisis to reach out and actually address their issues and concerns. As the pandemic went on, so the latter, it's almost like a year of two halves, if that's the expression, the latter half of the year has been more challenging. And I look at customer sat, it's fallen in the latter half, because there's a kind of expectation now that we've been living with COVID 15 months, really, having that expression, because of COVID, we can't serve you, or it is tiresome to us as consumers. So we've seen actually a bit of a backlash, and customer satisfaction in January was at its lowest point it's been since July 2015, which I think is interesting, and more complaints and issues were being reported across all industry sectors than ever before. So you've kind of seen this. But in terms of consumer behavior, I read somewhere it takes 66 days for us to change a habit. So that's consistently, or to get into something being a habit. And I think there's been a few things I would say, Darren, around this. Firstly, many of the things that are going on now were before the pandemic, but some of them have been accelerated. So if I look at our research, what's going to be more important as we're going forward, certainly stuff around sustainability. That's been big for quite a long time. I can see Alice nodding. The whole kind of enabling me as a consumer to act in a sustainable way. There's an expectation from consumers that organizations will help me to be better at the whole sustainability agenda. Our research shows that about 20% of people are prepared to pay more for a green or a better experience, but they're also less tolerant of greenwashing, and they'll call that out. So the whole green and sustainability agenda. But that's also about the social agenda, so the whole ESG agenda. So do I believe that this organization is acting in my best interest, but in the wider societal interests, has also become a key theme. So definitely something around sustainability, something around ethical behavior, and being seen to do the right thing, Darren. So, because of social media, because of the fact that we're living our world, lives in a much more virtual world, that's much easier to call that out. So less tolerance of inappropriate behavior. So I think there's a mixture of get it functionally right, which is going to continue to be really important. So do what you say on the tin, make sure your people are well trained, make sure you're easy to do business with. Those things are still as important as they ever were. But layered on top of that is, I think, a growing trend and expectations, as I said, around ethics, green, doing the right thing, being transparent, comms needing to be very, very human. We've just spent the whole last 15 months living in each other's houses. You don't, I've met people's kids. I've met their dogs. The doorbell will ring in a minute and I'll run off and have to go and answer that. That's the world we're in. So as consumers, we like that. We like that more human interaction. But don't mistake that for good governance in an organization, and don't mistake that for not delivering on my promises. And then
do you think the pandemic has almost sharpened consumer expectation in a way? Like they want more?
I think what it has done is it's highlighted just how important customer service is. So I'm not sure whether it's want more. I think people have much more, in fact, it's good for customer service because I think there's a bit more respect in some ways. We'll come back to this. There are, in some areas, more respect for the fact that the people that have kept the lights on, done all the good stuff that they've been doing, and actually service is an integral part of our society. And that's quite interesting too, because our research shows that 30% of us now will pay more, despite the pandemic, for a better customer experience. But, and this is the big but, it's quite polarized. So you've got that going on in one side, and then the other side, you've got a significant slug of the population that have been badly impacted economically, mentally, socially by COVID. And therefore, you've got the counterbalance of that. And you also, and I know we'll come on to this, have a small but quite significant group who, quite frankly, of consumers and that are not treating customer service people with respect. But I'm sure we'll come on to that a bit later, Dan. So,
yeah, I think it's an interesting point you made. You made an interesting point. Sorry to cut across. You made an interesting point around some people have used the pandemic as almost a mask to, excuse the pun, as a mask to provide poorer customer service as well. Because of the pandemic, we can't do A, B, and C, and so on.
Yeah, and I think that won't be tolerated. So this is not an excuse. It's not acceptable, and consumers will not find that acceptable. And I suppose the other thing, that I would raise over this is probably the digital piece as well. So obviously, we know, many more of us at different ages and now shopping online. And I'm pretty sure the debate to be today will be how much of that's going to shift. Will much come back to the high street? Where will we actually see that? And I know, Darren, you and I've had this conversation before. I personally think the high street's got a very bright future, but it has to think differently. And it has to think much more around, as we've talked about it, and I think the expression around being a theatre, a much more experience, an immersive experience is going to be really, really important. Why am I going to the high street? I'm going to the high street to meet friends. I'm going to the high street to have something to eat. Mixed use of our high street will be really, really important. But digital, absolutely. It's proven hugely successful and will do so. The balance, I think, going forward that we've got, and an issue we've got as organisations, is the issue around supply. Because, and you said, is the expectation greater? In my lifetime, if you think about it, prior to COVID, we could have anything we wanted, probably pretty much on the same day. We could order it, Amazon would get it delivered on that same day. The reality of the world we're living in at the moment is that we're facing, I think with Darren, you were talking about it, 4 months for my sofa to be delivered, longer, that whole kind of, so there's some really interesting things. We've been very used as a consumers having everything yesterday. That is not the world we are currently in. So how organizations respond to that and deal with that, I think is going to be really, really important. And that's part of the customer experience, managing, helping to support, sourcing the right areas, good comms on that. So I know I've talked quite a lot, but for me, as a highlighted, big things that are going to be important to the consumer going forward: honesty, transparency, much more human, authentic, the green agenda, absolutely, but the wider sustainability agenda. Ensuring that you really, really focus and understand your customers' needs, which have changed, and this need for reassurance, and this need for advice, and this need for support provides, I think, a great opportunity for those of us that work in service and customer service to really hone that, actually, Darren, for a much better experience.
I was thinking last night, actually, as well. I was in a Brewdog pub last night. Big fan of what they've done in hospitality, and the team were just incredible. And so I was chatting to the team about what they enjoyed about their jobs, and it was really what came through was about the way that they were treated by their employers. What was really interesting, though, is when I came to pay the bill, I couldn't tip them on the card machine, or they didn't add service. They used something called Tip Jar. So I have to sort of go on, scan this QR code. I actually took the card away because I was so interested. And then I tipped them through a separate business, which felt a bit weird to me, but it works for them because 100% of the tips go to the team. But whatever that is happening at Brewdog, the team seemed very engaged last night. how do we repeat that kind of experience across hospitality and retail and recruit and retain the right people for the businesses and get the skill and capability that we needed as well? Because I think I get very annoyed about this. Retail and hospitality are still seen as second-class careers. And I know what retail has done for me as a person, and I find that we don't promote the industry enough to attract the right people.
Okay, so again, lots of really good questions in there. And
101 there, Joe. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. But so let's just take the first point. The link between customer satisfaction and employee engagement is huge. So for every 1% increase in employee engagement, you get almost a 0.5 increase in customer sat. So from a business point of view, there's a really compelling reason why you would do this and why you would invest in your staff. Secondly, your point of about recruitment, there was big fears, wasn't there, that we're going to have massive unemployment. That is not coming forward. In fact, daily reported on the news, we've got massive skill shortages. So as organisations, we're going to have to work really hard to attract and retain people in our organisations. And it's always been true that if you have a good engagement and experience overall with your employees, they're much more likely to stay, and therefore much more cost effective, because the cost of constantly going through the churn, to your point, is a really big issue. Over the issue about promoting the industry and having a career, well, I think that's a responsibility for us all. Because I think if you look at what the skills are required of people, customer service professionals, they are a whole set of skills that any CEO in any organization needs. Problem-solving skills, empathy, the ability to think through things, the use and balance of technology to human interface. Those are the things which are the future skills that this country and organizations will need. So for me, it's not about thinking about my job is to serve a table, my job is to serve a customer. It's about, if you think about the myriad of skills that individual brings, well, that's huge. And as organizations, if you think about the pandemic, huge opportunity now. I mean, I know if you're in retail and you're actually physically in a shop, there's less opportunity, but for a lot of us, we can recruit across the whole of the globe. It doesn't matter if you're wherever you are. That ability to recruit the right skills and capabilities. So, for me, this is such an important, Darren, I'm quite obsessive about it. We've done a lot of research around it. The link between really thinking very deeply. So that will bring us on to how do we do enough flexibility for people in terms of the workforce? How do we create meaningful work? And that the Institute was just kicked off actually this last week, a piece of work which is all going to be about the world of work. And what does the world of work look like in a post-pandemic situation? But I would say, if we're smart, this is a real opportunity to reset why a career in customer service is so important. And as you said, a really great opportunity. And you've got other panelists here that have worked in retail many, many years as well, Darren, and all of your listeners would have done. And I think we should be learning to be proud, and walk tall, because it's a great opportunity for people to really grow and develop a whole range of skills and capabilities.
I totally agree. And Joe, I want to continue our chat in a minute, actually, if I may as well, because I want to talk to you about an initiative that you guys have started working on with the way that teams are treated and around respect. But can we hold that thought? And I'm going to come back to you as well, because I do want to hear a bit more about that, as I heard about that just recently. Thank you. Take a sip of your tea or coffee now.
Thank you.
Alice, you've moved. I guess it must have started raining inside.
The rain.
Outside.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. When it started getting on the screen, I thought it's time to move inside. So apologies for that.
Yeah. It's such a shame. You could have been sat there basking in sunlight right now, couldn't you?
Yesterday I would have been, but yeah, probably too pale to sit in the sun for an hour anyway. So the weather's helped me.
Good. Well, listen, great to have you with us. I'm going to take it off on a slightly different tact with you, if I may, please, and talk about kind of this online, offline thing, because customers don't think in that way, and I've always hated the term omnichannel. It's one of my personal pet hate words, because customers don't say, which channel of Argos am I going to shop in today? They just say, I'm going to shop at Argos, and then they access it the way that's convenient for them, phone, tablet, go to the shop and so on. How do we integrate those online and offline experiences? Because actually, some of them are still worlds apart in the same brand.
Yeah, and it's really interesting for us. So obviously I look after Argos, but also the Sainsburys brand. And if you think of Argos, we have an app, we have obviously our web, we have our pay at browse, we have, you know, the staff in store that are an amazing asset that we have. And every touch point that the customer interacts with, we want them to have exactly the same experience. We want it to, you know, them to feel the brand, to feel the love for the brand, and all of that. And if I take the Sainsbury's world that also I face into, online shopping completely different to in-store shopping, right? You know, worlds apart. And what we saw during the pandemic was kind of a dramatic increase in new customers into that brand, because we prioritized the elderly, the disabled and the vulnerable to ensure that they got their shopping. Now we're seeing that actually they want to get out and about, they want to get back into the store, and they're kind of questioning and saying, online this was so easy, or I could kind of track this, and how do we kind of put all that together? And for me, it's about how we use our technology and really how we kind of bring the technology together. And as you said, think less about this omni-channel experience, because that's not what customers think. Customers are just like, I'm interacting with Argos, or I'm interacting with Sainsbury's, or whoever it is. Like, I really don't care like whether it's through a mobile. You may have Teams internally, but that's not me. So I think that's really interesting. And I think the second piece is actually, you know, something that we try to do is ask the guys that are on the front line. So we have amazing teams across the country in all of our stores who actually are talking to these customers every day. And it can no longer be that, you know, people in head office sat in their ivory towers, if you like, that we can't ignore that voice of the customer anymore. There's more choice than ever for any customer in any industry to go after. As you mentioned Amazon, obviously one of our biggest competitors from an Argos perspective, but there's just so much competition now. You know, it is really important that we continue to connect with our customers and really, when we are building anything, think with that customer lens. And it has to be, everything has to be with that view, and less with, you know, as times of old, pet projects. You can't do a pet project anymore, because it really is about what your customer's telling us and the data that we get from them.
I think you make some great points. I mean, it's interesting when you think about what the pandemic has kind of forced retailers to do and think about. And I think one thing to say actually to you as a major supermarket and all the major supermarkets is they probably deserve a massive vote of thanks, first and foremost, from the nation. I think even Sainsbury's used the phrase feeding the nation, didn't they, last year? Because they were slammed with this kind of tidal wave of peak trade that they never saw coming. You know how long it takes to plan Christmas behind the scenes for any retailer. And they just got hit by this tidal wave. Their stores were being stripped. I'm sure we all remember that crazy few weeks where it felt like we were living in some apocalyptic world on the build up to lockdown 1. But the supermarkets kept us fed, and somehow they just turned it on. And yeah, they got things wrong, but they made it happen. I think a year in, there are still people that are being burned by, you know, their experiences with retailers. And I think one of the things I do hear now about the grocery chains is still 15 months on, still a lack of online delivery slots. Why is that happening when we've now had time to sort of get our heads around this world that we live in?
So there's a capacity peak, right? So if I think of the way that within Sainsbury's we pick and ship our orders, it's all done from in store. So I have where I shop in my local store, because I could not get an online delivery slot throughout the entirety of the pandemic.
You couldn't pull any strings behind the
scenes.
No,
I couldn't. So yeah, you see them going up and down the alley, like picking the items there. So you can only have as many pickers as your supermarket can, you know, maintain. You can only have as many orders as you've got the vans. You know, we had to pull vans out of kind of almost decommission to get all of those orders out there. And I think it's, you know, if I look at some of the trends and my own personal experience, I don't shop online anymore. I used to shop online every single week, but I couldn't get a delivery slot, not from Sainsbury's, obviously, but not from anywhere else. And so I was just like, do you know what? Sod it, I'm going to go in store. And for me, actually, I now prefer that in-store experience, which I shouldn't say because my entire job is based online, but I do now enjoy it. And I think there's we are facing within the grocery industry, and I'm sure everyone else in other competing supermarkets will feel the same, almost that lull of actually our loyal customers who pre-pandemic aren't shopping with anymore, or have moved to a different supermarket because they could get a delivery slot. And I know me and Ben have talked about this previously. He's moved to a different supermarket because he could get a delivery slot. So they've either moved or they've kind of gone in store, and now what's happening is that new customer base is also now returning to the store, and we've got this increased need to kind of build up loyalty and also build up the customer experience that we have, around online delivery shopping, and that it actually, is a really convenient way to shop, but also our delivery drivers and making sure that they've got the time to give that extra level of customer service that you'd expect if you came into one of our stores.
So tell me, were you an online shopper before the pandemic and you've now gone offline?
Correct, yes.
I love it. And that I think is like a great example of, some people shifting their behavior in the other way that you would expect. I mean, I'm a massive Amazon junkie, and I kind of hate myself for it. It's a guilty pleasure, but it's so convenient, and that's the number one reason. The packaging is ridiculous. So they've got so much still work to do in that front. But I do love Amazon, but I've always loved, pandemic or not, going grocery shopping. Call me weird. I just like going to supermarkets. I prefer seeing and choosing my own food, the temptation of seeing something you don't really want, but you're going to buy it anyway. I think you lose that piece online. So I've always loved just shopping in stores. Welcome to the offline grocery gang. It's fun, isn't it?
It is, and they're more of an experience now. I don't know if anyone else feels like that. In my local supermarket, I've got an Argos there, so I can pick up my Argos order. I've got my clothing from so I can, buy things that I didn't even know I needed. We've got a sushi bar. Like, it's just a whole experience, and it's becoming more of almost like an entire town centre under one roof. So I just like it because I can do everything in one go. I have got
a massive Sainsburys, like 20 minutes walk away. So I'm in Westminster, but then the 9 Elms one.
Yeah, that's huge.
It's like a world. It's like a whole Sainsbury's world. So it's like go there and spend way too much money and way too much time there. So congratulations on coaxing us in that way. Listen, good to talk. I'm going to come back to you, but I'm going to move on to Ben now, if I may. Thank you for those contributions, Alice. Really appreciate it. Ben, you've been waiting so patiently and so long. Hello.
How are you doing? Good morning.
You have got the most perfect white background there, by the way. Is that
good,
like a false background or just a white wall?
Yeah, it's just a white wall.
Well, it looks great. It frames you perfectly. So, Ben, thanks for waiting. In your world, what are you seeing as the key consumer trends that are emerging as a result of the pandemic?
Yeah, so one of the really interesting things that we do in conjunction with, so we work with London Economics, who are like behavioural specialists, and we do a report every year, and that report is called Digital Choice. And there was 5 in that report. We look at the key consumer trends, and there was 5 that really stood out, from my perspective, in the report for this year. Joe touched on one of them, which I really liked, which was moving towards purpose and trust, right? That's a definite growing trend. Alice just talked about what we call focal to local, right? So this focus on shopping locally. And then another one was the influencers, the rise of or continued rise of influencers on social. I read yesterday, and I just want to caveat that I'm not a watcher, but that on Love Island, you will be able to purchase the clothes they're wearing in real time via the app whilst you're watching the program. I mean, that for me was just like insane, but that shows the power of utilizing people who have a connection with other people to influence purchase in real time. But I think the 2 for me that I really like the most and that stand out, one is acceleration of online. You touched on that, so I'll go into that a bit more. So the ratio between offline and online. And then the second one was, if you like, seeking experiences, but at home, and self-improvement and the rapid growth in self-improvement. I'll start with the increase in the ratio of online versus offline. And I think it's no surprise probably to hear, but if you look at the stats in the first 3 months, typically every single year, you'll see a 1% increase in the ratio of online transactions versus in-store, and it increases online favorably each year, but it's only 20% as a total, 22 I think in the UK this year, for that as a ratio, but that increases at 1% year over year. We had a 10% shift in the first 3 months of lockdown. That's a decade's worth of online shift in the first 3 months. So, when you ask Alice the question about that online, change in behavior, I think one of the things that struck me, which was almost a reverse trend, was that suddenly I'm on online supermarkets and I'm queuing up. I'm in a waiting list to get my transaction. I mean, that's what I do in store, not what I do online. So there's a complete role reversal. And, if you look at online only retailers, 56% growth year over year in April in terms of total transactions, and about 600,000 consumers in the UK for the first time shopped or retail shopped online. So I think, it's definitely had a huge swing, but will some of those things change and those behaviors change? I think absolutely. I think, there's no doubt, and I'll talk about that, I guess, a bit later, but there's definitely a way for that trend to coexist and for them to work in unison together to get an even better customer experience. And then I think the other thing I mentioned then was self-improvement. I think one of my favorite stats I read was that Open University had 950,000 enrollments during lockdown into online education. Wow. So nearly 1 million enrollments into online education. And if you look at it in any stat website, you'll see that online education was one of the highest growth products. And I think that's fascinating because if you think about, I gained time back, right? I don't have to travel in. I have an hour's commute. I gain that time back. So now I do utilize it for reading and I try and use it for an educational purpose. I didn't consciously think about it. It just happened and now I stick to it. I actually enrolled, and to give you an example from my real life, I enrolled in a masterclass, but it wasn't actually to do with business or work. It was on how to make pizzas, because I wanted to learn from someone who was amazing at making pizzas. How do I learn their skill? Because I love them and then I can do it with my kids, right? So I enrolled in a masterclass, I completed that, and now I have a pizza oven, which I love, not plugging a product, but Uni pizza oven, amazing. And I utilize it all the time. But why is that then really interesting? Because if you look at someone like Gusto, what they have done, with the self-improvement trend and this experience trend that was touched on earlier, was that now in people's homes is where we create experiences. So what I did is I learned or had self-education in a specific area, but to create a home experience. Every Sunday, we now build pizzas as a family. And if you look at a brand like Gusto, who is providing the ability for people to create a restaurant style experience in their home, I think that's a really powerful growing trend. They've become a unicorn, they're $1 billion valuation now. Because they're enabling people who are now in their homes much more to create an experience within that home. And I think when we finish the pandemic, you'll definitely see, I think, one of the recent stats I had was 1 in 5 will continue to do alcohol-based experiences at home. So, I think probably for most people in their corporate experiences, we've done things like virtual cocktail evenings, things like that. People, 1 in 5 will continue to do those types of behaviors of experiences at home when we move forward. So I think, it's just a really interesting reflection on how people are creating those, one, education, but then turning those into online experiences as well.
Yeah, I mean, and it is underlying the word experience, right? Because it's things that you actually can do and enrich yourself and learn with as well. So, and we're all waiting for the invite to yours for pizza, by the way, Ben, just so just FYI.
Do you know what? I've never had more questions on Facebook from friends about how good is the pizza oven? Is it worth buying? And show me the pizza. So
I have to say, my sister and my brother-in-law did something similar with their teenage sons. They sort of learned as a family to make pizzas together, and they did it last year as well in lockdown one. One of the things to keep the boys entertained And boy, do they make great pizza now. I love visiting there because the pizza is better than anywhere you will buy in any restaurant, basically. So
Exactly.
let's all make pizza. Life will be a better place. How do businesses retain those people though? That's what I'm interested to know. So you think it's a permanent change. I think you're probably right. But even I dipped into the meal kit world, HelloFresh, the Gusto and so on, the Mindful Chef. I dipped in, I've dipped out. I haven't really sustained that behavior. How do businesses like that keep people? Because I think people have been experimenting as well.
Yeah. I mean, my thinking on this whole topic of retention is about how do you combine. I always look at just two core elements. It's like customer intelligence and then content intelligence. Customer being, what do I know about this person? What's their name, birthday, where do they live? Anything to do with the customer themselves. Then you've got content intelligence. What do they buy? What do they consume? And how frequently do they do it? And I think when you look at those two things, and it's something that in our personalization side of the business, the two of the fundamental areas, because when you bring them together, you then create something really powerful. And I want to use the example of pubs, because there's a big UK chain who's making some great technology advancements in combining, if you like, the in-store or in-pub experience with how do they then take that forward, utilizing the best parts of digital. And I think they're a great example of both. When I go to a local pub, they know me as a customer. They know who I am, my name, they know a lot about me. And so they have that information. But actually what they don't know is how frequently I shop there or go to the pub, what I drink, what I eat, and that type of information. That is best consumed as the content side in a digital sphere. So there was an app that one of the big pub chains has implemented, which during COVID allowed them to people to order food, via the app, and therefore not have to get close or transact directly with the waitress or the host. So when you think about that, and the data that's captured via that digital asset, how do you take that forward? Well, for me, it would be, there's no doubt when lockdown lifts, everyone rushes back to the pub. It's an experience they enjoy and they want to return to, or restaurants or whatever it may be. But ultimately, if you can then retain the digital investment, some pubs invested in gardens, great. Some have invested in apps. They want to have a digital ability to contain the content information. So Ben likes to come on a Friday. In the app, he orders fish and chips and he orders, a Doom Bar beer, right? Now I know that information. I know customer information about Ben. I know what content he buys. What can I do with that? I can nudge him. I can send him rewards. I can say to him, Ben, it's Friday. It's fish and chips time. Come in by 5. And I tell you what, we'll give you your Doom Bar for free. It's really simple data. But when it's brought together and you combine the in-store experience, like Joe said, with the ability to combine it with the power of data, I think then you create something that's going to allow you to have a more meaningful relationship with your customers as you move forward. I think we talked about social media earlier. We're in an attention short world. And I think you've got to be able to be with your customers. You've got to be able to add value to them when they're 99% of the time spending it elsewhere. And you've got to know what your interest point is for them and when it's relevant. If I'm a pub and I'm just sending me messages every Monday when I never go to a pub, it's a waste of time and energy.
Yeah.
But with the right message at the right time on a Friday, I'm probably yours. So yeah, that would be my view on it. And probably the only other thing I'd add is, because again, my own experience is, I know if you look at some of the stats around the investment in self-service, right? So my bank is a great example, NatWest. When I used to use their online self-service function, it wasn't great in the past. Now there's been a huge investment in the chatbot's capability to manage my request in a far more frequent and, if you like, sometimes more capable capacity than waiting to get through to an agent, waiting to speak to someone. So I think, again, it's a great example, of how brands have invested to manage COVID, but how if they retain that going forward and continue to invest it, like Joe said, I had the most amazing customer experience the other day with a chatbot, and it answered my question and dealt with it in record time. And I thought, wow, it was the first time I'd ever had that experience. So, people will return into their banks and still ask the same questions that they should know the answer to. but now there's an ability for people to serve customers more effectively.
An amazing experience with the chatbot is not a sentence you expect to be strung together very often. So it's good to hear.
No, I think in 4 years, they're saying chatbot retail sales will go from about 2 million, 2.8 to about 140 million in chatbot sales. So if you think about how AI and that intelligence is growing, it's going to be a different world in 4 years, I think.
Karen from the Retail Bulletin is just asking who that was again. Which chatbot was it?
NatWest, the one I used.
And do you know who their supplier is?
I don't know.
Why not, Ben? We need all the information.
Yeah, that's very true. Oh, look,
okay. I'm going to come back to you for some closing thoughts, actually, Ben, as well. But Joe, I'm going to come back to you because time is whizzing by. By the way, wonderful panel. We are holding our audience number beautifully as well. They haven't asked any questions, but they haven't left us. So that's a really good measure as well. So thank you for being compelling enough to keep them with us. And thank you, audience, for staying with us as well. Joe, delivering customer service is all about people delivering it and people feeling motivated to deliver it. But there has been a lot of statistics lately that worryingly so point to a rise in abuse to people on the front line, whether it's in call centers, in stores and so on. And I know you guys have been looking at this. Can you tell us a bit more about your Respect campaign?
Thank you, Darren. And I kind of referenced it really right at the beginning. So I think there's two bits, and it is this degree of polarization that is going on. So in many ways, I think we've said before, I think some people are respecting service more, but there is definitely a growing group that is not. So if I take you back 12 months, the Institute has the privilege of being the Secretariat for the All Parliamentary Group on Customer Service. So that's one of our key roles. And June last year, we invited USDOR, who are the retail union, to come and talk to us as a group. And they talked about very eloquently and very sadly about the increase in the level of abuse and hostility towards retailers, actually, in terms of customer service professionals, in terms of the retail setting. And I found it quite shocking, if I was honest, Darren. So the Institute, we actually undertook a wider piece of research across a whole range of different industry sectors. And I think this was the really important thing for me, is that what has came to light was that this situation is not just in retail. It's in public services, it's in financial services, it's on online, as you were saying, and it's also in person. And throughout the pandemic, what basically our research was showing, that over 50% of customer service professionals had experienced some form of hostility or abuse throughout the pandemic. Now, we've been running that, and we launched our campaign on BBC Breakfast, actually, last June, and it's called Service with Respect. And we've been calling for three things, really, Darren. One, to get as many organisations on this and focused on this so that they have a zero tolerance towards abuse towards their customer service people. So that has meant helping them to have better training, helping them to deal with the issues and problems when they're in that. And I'm sure Alice can probably think of many examples in an Argos or in the Sainsburys store where that has. So getting the organisation to be really focused on it and helping and supporting their people when it happens. Secondly, around getting us as consumers to think a bit. I mean, the reality is that, from time to time, we all get a bit frustrated. We all get a bit annoyed with something, but there's a massive difference between being frustrated and actually the sorts of level of abuse that we're talking about. Because on the verbal abuse, it's being sworn at, it's being threatened, and certainly on some of the online situations, with comments like, I know where you live, and some dreadful stuff that is kind of, and trolling and other various things. Wow. So on the physical, it can range from verbal, but also people being punched, spat at, COVID, I've got coughed on, all sorts of kind of things. So it was a pretty shocking set of evidence. And we've been running this over the last, as I said, since last June. And we did further research in January. And there's also, not only is this unacceptable in terms of a behaviour thing, it's also a link to how many people go off sick. Or back to your point, Darren, decide that they no longer want to work in an industry sector where they feel not supported. So there's a major issue for me about making sure from an organisational point of view, we're doing everything we possibly can to protect, and there's a duty of care anyway on us, but we're doing everything we possibly can do to protect and have a zero tolerance. There's a requirement as consumers for us just to pause and think about the impact that we might be having and to manage that. Now, the levels of real abuse are small, thankfully. You know, it's a small percentage, but it shouldn't happen. And the final bit, and this is the point that we're trying to do, we're calling for more for government to really think about this, Darren, a bit more, and to think about how we can address that, whether that's through a deterrent, through a change in the law, making sure that we're reporting it more, making sure that, you know, we're policing sufficiently so that the police can follow up on it. So it's a really important campaign. Just a bit of a plug for it. We've got 160 organisations, which is great, that are signed up for it. You can find out more by going to our website, basically, Darren. But we're really serious about this, really keen to protect and support people, anybody. 61% of the workforce in the UK are in some form of customer related role. So that would mean they will interact with the customer. So, you know, we owe it to these people to make sure, in my mind, that we're supporting them and protecting them, which is really what the whole campaign's about.
Joe, it's not a plug at all. I'm happy we managed to talk about it. And as Joe just said, if you want more information, please go to the Institute of Customer Services website and you can find out more there. Joe, thank you for being a wonderful guest today. That's it for us right now. So thank you so much. No doubt we'll work again, hopefully work together again, and keep up the great work. It's always good to see you. Alice.
Always great to be here. Thank you.
Alice, what's Sainsburys Argos take on the points that Joe's just been talking about? How's it been for you guys? Do you have any sort of view or intel on how your team have been treated?
Yeah, it's really interesting. So we are, as a head office staff, we're encouraged to work within the stores quite frequently. I spent quite a lot of time at the start of the pandemic, but also over Black Friday and Christmas. And I think it's really important to stress that it is something that happens every day. The amount of occasions that I've been working in store, and it's happened to me, or I've experienced it happening to other people, or some of the horror stories that come back, you know, from when my team have been out there, and you just think, it's insane, like some of the words and, as you said, the physical abuse, because they can't get their Barbie doll that they ordered from Argos, and you know, it's your fault, and it is horrific. So I know that we obviously have a very robust program of support for the staff in stores. We are, as head office staff, when we go into the stores, we're trained as well to make sure that if we identify anything like that, we treat it in the best way, and we treat it in, you know, a way that can make sure that any staff involved are kind of supported through it. Because actually, you know, we probably have all seen those signs driving around the motorway, like "slow down, it's my daddy working," but it's exactly the same in stores. It really is, you know, that people take that home with them, and I think it's, yeah, I just think it's such an important thing, and I know that I think we support it fully. Yeah,
We do, Alice. Yeah.
It comes back to the headline of the campaign Joe was talking about. It just comes back to respect and the fact that people in hospitality and retail and customer call centers and so on just aren't treated as human beings. They are there to serve us, and they're thought of as second-class citizens. I've seen it myself in many retail stores, you know, as a customer, just open-mouthed at the way that some customers behave. And I have to confess, I got involved in a couple of tussles a couple of times with people, just trying to remonstrate with them about what they think they're doing, talking to people in that way. And I probably should shut my mouth and not get involved. But I think it's because I'm a retailer and I spent 10 years as a store manager. And I just, some customers just don't get it. And the things, you're right, they get so angry over are astonishing. But well, I mean, and one thing you just said there, Alice, as well, and it's, you know, to your credit, is a head office team that get out to their stores. One thing that yanks my chain a lot is people that never get out to their stores and don't really understand. You know, they send lots of messages of engagement to their stores, but they never actually go out and meet them. So that's really refreshing to hear that the team do that. And thank you for joining us. I know you've had a hectic 24 hours as well. So thank you for joining us from your leafy background. It's been really good to have you on the panel, and lots of my best regards to all the team at Sainsburys Argos.
Having me.
We have an answer, by the way, for the chatbot, the NatWest chatbot. So someone hit a TRB guest. So thank you for saying this person has said it's supplied by Live Person and my firm. I hope I'm saying this right. Spicer or Spica Digital is the official supplier of that solution. SPICA Digital. Spica, Spicer. Who knows? I'm probably saying one or the other. So, but that's the answer to that. I'm going to ask you to close things off if I can, Ben. By the way, thank you to you and Webloyalty for sponsoring today's event as well. I really appreciate your support on that. We do always need our sponsors and we always appreciate you. So thanks for that. Kind of continuing the theme that we've just finished with Joe and Alice. The pandemic aside, there have been other major events, right? I mean, obviously, the division caused over Brexit, you know, the Black Lives Matters protests last year, the awful far-right protests we saw on the streets in Westminster last summer, environmental protests. There's been a lot of anger, division out there. These events on themselves have had a unique impact on consumers' behaviour. What's your view on all of that? Has this all been sort of thrown into the mix and made it kind of a hot mess of things to untangle?
Yeah, I mean, simply, I just say, you're right. It's like all the macroeconomic effects. You know, I would say that it's not been COVID in isolation. I think that's the big thing to remember. You know, to your point, we had Brexit. You know, goodness me, if I couldn't turn on the telly without hearing about Brexit, and then suddenly it just disappeared. But we've had Brexit, we've had Black Lives Matter, we've had environmental protests, and I think all these things will continue. You know, I think it's like we talked about earlier. You know, I think there's good and bad that can come from it, but I think, you know, as a future trends and behaviors, I just think we're seeing an accelerated rate of people being able to have a voice and use it. And I think, you know, that's good, can be used for good like anything, and it can be used not for good. And I think one of the things I loved that I heard the other day was that, you know, I talked about, and perhaps gave the worst example of Love Island for social media, but on a flip side of that, to your point on the environment, you know, David Attenborough joined, I think it was Instagram, to spread the word of, you know, helping save our planet. And within one afternoon had 1.4 million followers.
I love it.
I love that, because all he's joining for, I'm sure he has, you know, other things he would rather do than be on Instagram, but it allows him to spread his word and his message as to why we should look after and sustain our planet. And I think, if anything, I think that's just what I would take away, is just that, you know, there's lots of kind of macroeconomic effects happening. You've got to think of it as a bigger picture, but just utilize those channels that are available to do good. And just like Joe's mentioned, I think it's fantastic, and Alice had real experience of that. I think all of these things, you know, play an important part. And, you know, I couldn't say it any other better than people should just be kind. I think that's the main thing, just be kind.
And that's a perfect way to end, and with a mention of a national treasure thrown into the answer as well.
Yeah.
Like, in fact, national treasure doesn't even do David Attenborough's service. He is amazing. Perfect close. Thank you so much to Joe and Alice and Ben. An hour and some has whizzed by, and the audience is still there as well. So thank you so much for staying with us. Our next webinar kicks off at 11 o'clock, actually, talking about how to thrive in the always-on digital era. But for now, thank you to all of our amazing panelists, Ben, and your sponsorship at Webloyalty. We're done for this first session. Thank you for sticking with us. Come back to some more sessions. Hope to see all you panelists out in 3D sometime soon. For now, enjoy the rest of your morning. For those coming back, see you 11 a.m. Take care.